Every year, on this evening of commemoration, we solemnly mark Holocaust Memorial Day here in Dublin. We remember 6 million Jewish people murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. And we remember the millions of other persecuted minorities who were victims of Nazi atrocities. This evening's ceremony provides us with the opportunity to cherish the memory of those who perished and to reflect on the consequences of the Holocaust today. I invite the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Caroline Conroy, to welcome you.
On behalf of the City and people of Dublin, it is a great honour to host this important national event, which is held every year in the Round Room at the Mansion House. We feel privileged to be among survivors of the Holocaust and descendants of survivors who have made Dublin and Ireland their home. We welcome representatives of all of the victim groups who live among us here in Ireland. Holocaust Memorial Day marks the date of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau on the 27th of January 1945. Tonight, we recall the suffering inflicted on the Jewish people of Europe and on those of other faiths and ethnicities persecuted during the Holocaust. We reflect on this and on the suffering still being inflicted on people throughout the world today. We acknowledge the work of the Holocaust Education Ireland in its endeavours to educate and inform about the Holocaust and ensure that it is never denied or distorted, but always remembered.
An Taoiseach Leo Varadkar will now address us.
Ard vera, ara, iachti, a gwiniusha galer. Is kush an ordom ve I láthar tróna nu, con a jarvu gajin valcha, keikov tamanta, agus keikov digersach, is a tamid con until a husku a camora. Lord Mayor, Ministers, Public Reps, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to be here this evening to reaffirm Ireland's resolute commitment to reflecting and commemorating the Holocaust. As we gather here this evening in the Round Room in the Mansion House, we remember the unspeakable atrocities that took place 75 years ago. We remember the millions of lives that were lost, those lives lost to prejudice and hatred. Is quibbling Nadine for boss. I'm grateful that some of Ireland's Holocaust survivors have joined us this evening. Your powerful and personal testimony is a poignant and heartbreaking reminder of why it's so important that we continue to gather this Sunday every year. Through speech, reconciliation, readings, and music, we pause to reflect and remember. In remembering the millions of Jewish people who were persecuted and murdered, we also remember all of the victims who suffered because of their ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, political affiliations, or beliefs. In doing so, we renew our moral and legal commitment to respond and reflect and react to all types of prejudice and hatred. It's important that societies never forget the extent of the atrocities of the Holocaust, that new generations understand the pain and suffering that people can inflict on each other. The Holocaust, the Shoah, was a unique event in history when the Nazis tried to extinguish an entire people. That was their design, genocide until nobody was left. So there would be no witnesses and no memory. The scale of that is hard to comprehend. 6 million Jewish men and women were murdered, equivalent almost to the entire population of our island. As Ireland marks 50 years of our membership of the European Union, the origins of the European Union are as relevant today as they ever were. It was born out of war, above all a peace project, Europe saying never again would such things happen on our continent. Peace is fragile. The rule of law, democracy and human rights must be actively protected, and vigilance remains the price of freedom. This year, the need to remember the horrors of the Holocaust seemed particularly significant. The need to be ever vigilant, to truly understand the extent of the dangers of dehumanizing individuals. Russia's evil and brutal war against Ukraine has resulted in the biggest displacement in Europe that we've seen since World War II, and the largest influx of refugees that Ireland has ever experienced. Europe has acted with unity of purpose, and Ireland is steadfast in its commitment to Ukraine and our welcome for the Ukrainian people. Racism and hatred and violence can never be tolerated. Our strong commitment to the commemoration of the Holocaust involves combating all forms of anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and intolerance in society. As we see from the events in Jerusalem this week, the killing of Jews at prayer, we know that anti-Semitism remains prevalent in the world. And around the world, the fight against issues like anti-Semitism, ethnic cleansing, genocide, racism, xenophobia, and other expressions of hatred continues. The ever-growing presence of hate speech, ever compounded by conflict, racism, and misogyny, threatens our fundamental aspirations under the UN Charter. To safeguard human rights and achieve fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, gender, sexual orientation, or religion. Fundamental to combating these issues and achieving these freedoms is a commitment to promote remembrance and education about the catastrophic events, in particular the Holocaust, in our schools and universities and communities. We must ensure that future generations understand and recognise the ideologies, the actions and beliefs that led to atrocities such as the Holocaust. In October 2021, at the Malmo International Forum on Holocaust Remembrance, the government made a pledge. This pledge reinforced our commitment to legislating against hate crime and hate speech. And Ireland is honoured to join over 27 countries in the largest decentralised memorial in the world, the Stolpersteiner Project, which bears witness to the lives and stories of the victims of the Holocaust. Holocaust Education in Ireland held a significant commemoration in June of last year in memory of some of the Irish victims of the Holocaust, with the unveiling of 6 Stolpersteine at St. Catherine's School in Dublin 8. We're very grateful for the work that Holocaust Education Ireland does in order to remember and commemorate those lives, and we are pleased to lend our support to the inspiring Crocus project. This project reaches more than 100,000 people across Europe, young people rather, and provides a tangible way to promote a message of tolerance, respect, education and remembrance. Ireland also supports, through our embassy in Warsaw, the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation, which works for the conservation and preservation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration sites. In concluding, thank you again for the invitation to attend this evening with you. Tom anbuíocht an cura bhean seo. Every year, we must continue to stop, pause and reflect. We must never lose sight of why we attend every year. The pain and suffering caused by the Holocaust is immeasurable, but our response is not. And so Ireland remains committed to the Holocaust remembrance and to fighting anti-Semitism and racism wherever we see it. Gur míle maith agaibh go léir.
The Stockholm Declaration, of which Ireland is a signatory, is an international intergovernmental agreement between countries, committing them to commemorate and educate about the Holocaust. Mr. Roderick O'Gorman, Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, will read an extract from that important document.
We, the governments attending the Stockholm International Forum on the Holocaust, recognise that it was a tragically defining episode of the 20th century, a crisis for Europe and a universal catastrophe. The unprecedented character of the Holocaust fundamentally challenged the foundations of civilization. After more than half a century, it remains an event close enough in time that survivors can still bear witness to the horrors that engulfed the Jewish people. The terrible suffering of millions of Jews and other victims of the Nazis has left an indelible stain across Europe and must forever be seared in our collective consciousness. The selfless sacrifices of those who defied the Nazis and sometimes gave their own lives to protect or rescue Holocaust victims must also be inscribed in our hearts. We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education, remembrance, and research about the Holocaust in our schools, universities, communities, and other institutions. With humanity still scarred by anti-Semitism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, racism, xenophobia, and other expressions of hatred, we commit to fight against these evils and reaffirm our common aspiration for a democratic and tolerant society, free of prejudice and other forms of bigotry.
The boycotts of Jewish businesses and professions, introduced in April 1933, were soon followed by book burnings throughout Germany, and these heralded the introduction of further anti-Jewish measures by the Nazis. I invite Mary Rose Durley, journalist and writer, to give her reading.
Jewish religious books, books by Jewish authors, and books about Jews were burned in public bonfires, along with other books by authors who the Nazis condemned as degenerate or un-German. Book burnings took place throughout Germany, where some of the finest works of literature, history, philosophy, science, and art were all destroyed. This was intended to leave Jews and Germans bereft of learning about their culture, their history, and their heritage.
Word reached Berlin that some members of the killing squads found their work distressing. They asked head office to find a more efficient way of murdering Jews. And so the Wannsee Conference was convened on the 20th of January, 1942. I invite Nora Owen, former Minister for Justice, to tell us about the meeting.
Reinhard Heydrich, chief of the Reich Security Main Office, summoned 15 delegates to a meeting in a lakeside villa at Wannsee outside Berlin. He asked them to endorse Hitler's plans for the total annihilation of the Jewish people of Europe. Eichmann presented the delegates with a list of the number of Jews living in each European country who the Nazis intended to murder. Ireland appears on the list with a total of 4,000 Jews. The inclusion of Ireland on the Wannsee list has huge significance for the Irish Jewish community, had the war taken a different course and the Nazis not been defeated. The delegates debated who was Jewish according to bloodline considerations and discussed evacuation and resettlement, euphemisms for murder. They concluded that a more efficient method of killing was possible, one that would produce little residue and spare those operating the killing sites the negative psychological trauma of face-to-face killing. In less than 2 hours, the delegates gave their unanimous support for the implementation of the final solution to the Jewish question: the establishment of death camps in which Jewish people and other victims would be murdered by poison gas.
Death camps were established where millions of Jews and other victims were murdered in gas chambers. The killing squads continued to operate in rural areas in the East until 1945, in parallel to the murders taking place in the killing centres. I invite Ken McHugh of Sport Against Racism Ireland to tell us about the death camps. Youth reader Kelly Donnellan will read from the memoir of Kitty Hart Moxon from Poland, who was 16 years old when she was imprisoned in Auschwitz-Birkenau. She still talks about her experience.
6 death camps were created by the Nazis, all of them on Polish soil, where approximately 3 million Jews and thousands of other victims were murdered in gas chambers. Prisoners were selected for life or death. 90% were selected to die. They were ushered into undressing areas where they were told to leave their clothes neatly on the numbered pegs and to tie their shoes together to make them easier to find when they come back from the showers. They never came back. Their clothing, shoes, and their personal belongings were sorted and sold in markets back in Germany. Human hair was used in the manufacture of textiles. This systematic industrial process of murder was unprecedented in human history.
As evening came, the whole sky was red. Smoke and flames were pouring out of all the chimneys. Here were the death factories. Today, in 2023, it is barely credible to someone like myself, who lived through the worst of it, that members of a younger generation cannot believe it happened at all. But I did live through it, and I do know it happened, because I was there.